Like always, first and foremost, condolences. A stolen mobile phone and a wad of money had put an end to a bustling gathering at a Bolton home and led to a heated dispute where a man had been ejected from the house. Because neither man could stem their tempers, that raw emotion led to the brutal end of 25-year-old Tyrone Williamson, who was classed as a caring and loving brother and a son. He was also super popular. So popular in fact that within 90 minutes, Tyrone's half-brothers and friends were going to try and kill the man responsible for taking Tyrone's life. They effectively bladed him 5 times. Now, Tyrone's older sister Laura explained how she had witnessed the daunting still of Tyrone being carried out by emergency services and a cordon being put in place. Tyrone was put in the back of an ambulance, his body was lifeless, and on the streets, emergency services had to perform open heart surgery. Laura went on to say that the very moment when she realised that Tyrone had been bladed by someone that he had known for years, her world had fallen apart, and the part of her was taken from her the night that Tyrone was pronounced dead. Again, Tyrone was only 25 years old, and he was also a dad. The madman responsible for such a despicable and heinous and callous act was 42-year-old Anthony George. Not only was Anthony George a floundering addict when it came to drink and also drug, but Anthony was also an alleged thief that could not keep his hands off other people's property. Like any other day, the 42-year-old had started his day by drinking and also consuming weed, but he had then heard that Tyrone and his family and friends were having a gathering at the Battenberg Road address in Bolton on December 11th of 2021. Now, after meeting up with a friend, Anthony George had taken a blade with him, and then he ended up going to that address. Of course, no one knew that Anthony was armed, because if he did, maybe Tyrone would have thought twice. Now, Anthony was in a familiar place with people he called friends. He was in the company of Tyrone also, and also described as the glue that kept his family together. Now, it's not known if Anthony George was invited, or if he just walked into the property off the street. Now, during the trial, the facts were read out. While at the Battenberg Road address, Anthony George had been accused of taking a mobile phone and also some cash. It was believed that Anthony had been caught with the phone too. In response, Anthony was removed from the Bolton address. Witnesses then described Anthony George's face contorting into a grimace, and he was mad, big mad. He was heard to have shouted, "Watch, I'm going to all yours next." The clash had then said to reach such a heated stage that Anthony's ex-girlfriend was called to the scene. The girlfriend had told police that when she looked at her former boyfriend, she could not put the pieces together of the man that was stomping up and down the road, shouting, swearing, and blade tightly gripped in his hands until his knuckles had turned white. He was clearly under the influence. Again, Anthony George screamed that he would all their necks. According to witnesses, Anthony kept repeating, "Watch what's going to happen to them. They are accusing me of taking the phone and the money." Now, CCTV caught the moment that a car had arrived at the scene and Anthony George was seen entering the passenger seat. People believed that the car was actually a taxi. Tyrone, who had become agitated, had then followed up to the car in order to continue the argument. Again, Tyrone was not armed and he did not know that Anthony George had a blade. Now, Tyrone had promised to warn Anthony George, and in response, he had struck Anthony through that window. With that simple statement, followed up by Tyrone's actions, Anthony went straight into K mode. His blade had been pulled out, and again was in full view, and in the brawl, Anthony plunged his blade into Tyrone at least 4 times. Purposeful, relentless, and with brute and extreme force in the chest area. Now, Tyrone stumbled back, his eyes were agape and glistening, sweat on his brow, and the 25-year-old turned to his friend, shocked and in a daze, says, "I've been bladed," and this was at 6:30 p.m. At the same moment, the friend noticed that Tyrone's t-shirt had turned red, and that's when they knew that Tyrone was in very real danger. Emergency services were called to the scene, and they were blue lighted, and police and paramedics both arrived within a few minutes. So serious were Tyrone's injuries that a trauma consultant had to arrive on the scene as well, and they had to perform open heart surgery right there on the street. This was in front of Tyrone's friends, Tyrone's family, and also children. Now, put in the back of an ambulance, Tyrone was then rushed to hospital, and each second and minute was crucial. But sadly, the blade to the heart had caused catastrophic injury, and Tyrone was pronounced dead a few hours later in the hospital. Now, while Tyrone's friends and family were awaiting for the news or trying to come to terms with Tyrone being bladed, Anthony George had fled the scene, and he sought refuge at a friend's house. Anthony George, still under the influence, had bragged to his mates, animatedly and almost excitingly. He told his mates that he had jibbed someone up. That's what they get for calling me a thief. And within 90 minutes, Tyrone Williamson's half-brother, Nathan Carney Williamson, his two friends, Adam Deesa Green and Jason Walding, had formed a mob, and they went on the hunt for Anthony George, a person whom they had also known for years. The objective was simple. They were going out for revenge, and they were going to blade Anthony. At 8:15 p.m, Anthony George was back out on the street, and he was located in the town with a friend. While one person chased Anthony's friend, the trio had then pulled out their own blades, plural, and then began to swipe and jab and poke and prod. Anthony had been bladed at least 5 times, areas such as face, chest, leg. Now, if that wasn't enough, as well as being bladed, Anthony was struck with hands and feet, and he was also booted. He was then told the exact reason why this was happening to him. Now, the objective was to K him, but thankfully, Anthony George lived. Now, this is how thorough Tyrone Williamson's friends were. When Jason Walding was arrested, it was said that he was still angry and fuming, and told police officers exactly what he thought. He said, "Good, I hope the F dies." Now, when Anthony George was arrested at the hospital after surviving his own blading and being cared for by the intensive care team, Anthony George had started to build his defence. Anthony's solicitors attempted to tug on the heartstrings of the judge and the jury by saying that Anthony had been hooked on drugs since the age of 13. The moment Anthony had committed himself to using his blade that he had taken to the gathering, Anthony's defence team admitted that there was intention to hurt Tyrone, even cause serious harm, but Anthony did not want to K Tyrone, and the fact that he did weighs heavily on Anthony George every single day, and it's hard to come to terms with. The solicitor finished his argument by saying that the M of 25-year-old Tyrone Williamson was down to the misuse of Class A and Class B, and also drink. However, the judge was not swayed in the slightest by the sub-story, mostly due to the fact that Tyrone's family and friends and children had to witness a lifeless Tyrone being worked on the pavement in what would have been a highly charged and emotional and traumatic experience and scene. Anthony George was found guilty of the M, and he was jailed for life, with a minimum term set at 21 years. Let me know in the comments, does the crime match the sentence? And lastly, whether we agree with the situation or not, Tyrone's friends had showed that they were loyal to a fault when they acted on revenge on Tyrone's behalf. Condolences. Stay safe.